analyze and think. Because besides what you just saw, strategy is still something that a company has to go through. What we try and do, by and large, is we try to tell companies that the environment no longer looks like the picture you're looking at right now. This is the picture, the ontological real world that we've become used to for decades. As organizations, we look at the environment. We have politics, economy, social trend changes, technology, green environment, issues of sustainability. But in some way or another, we treat it just as systems. And we also treat it as stable. The previous speaker referred to the fact that the environment isn't stable. It's moving all the time. And then if you think about strategy within the realms of quarters, five forces, typically you will have there the supplier system, buyer system, substitute products, new entrants. But it's not stable, it's not static. It's moving all the time. The question that philosophy asks is, what is moving? What is this movement that you keep on talking about or telling us about? What's moving, ladies and gentlemen, is first and foremost, you're not just dealing with systems, you're dealing with people. Let's just talk labor. That's the system I'm going to focus on, or the human system for that matter. If we say that it moves, what is it that changes? What changes is your, what we call, relational status over that system. In other words, the kind of relationship that you have with your laborers at a specific point in time. We've got some phenomenal work that was done by Don Beck, Dr. Don Beck, who visited the country last year on spiral dynamics. Some of you might be familiar with his work. And what he's given us is he's given us a paradigm that helps us to categorize worldviews. So what he does is he takes something like this and he breaks our views into specific compartments. So up there on the left-hand side, you have the so-called worldview. That's where you would sit on some specific level at a particular point in time. And the bottom left, that'll be the type of world that you see, the glass of water that you're looking at. And on the lower right-hand side, that's the larger systems, politics and economy. Let's not get too technical about this. Suffice to say that the pictures I just showed you, with the help of people like John Beck, we can now start to categorize those so that we can make some sort of a sense out of it. It goes a little bit further. And this is where the significance lies in. Don't worry too much about the detail. It's in the book if you really want more information. But let's look at the principle. What this slide is trying to tell you is that you are finding yourself on a level 3. Forget about what it means right now. It's just different from the other levels. If you find yourself on a level 3, it's categorized as a beige color. When you look at your society, your immediate society, by default, you will see the things from where you are viewing things. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, if you're a parent, you will try and bring your child up from a parent's view. But we all know that if you want to be a better parent, you've got to view the world of the 13-year-old through the eyes of the 13-year-old. It's no different from laborer and manager. It's no different from shareholder and worker. This, Dr. Beck tells us, is your default view. If you're on a certain level, you will automatically see that glass in a certain way. It's predetermined. So our brains are wired. That's why you have the extremes that I just illustrated to you on the basis of the new research. Similarly, if you find yourself in a level 8, you will do exactly the same. Now let's just take those two levels. What the levels basically are, to just very briefly explain that, is those are levels of evolution, evolvement, that we develop into as we grow older. But you're not necessarily on a specific level. It's more the level is in you. Let me explain that. A level 7 means that you act in your own self-interest by playing the game to win. That's your general uptake of life when you operate on a level 7. We call it, the popular name for that, we call it the strive game. You will test options for greater autonomy and compete for success and influence. That's the level that's in you at that specific point in time. Your worldview, let's look at your worldview, is rational, it's a well-oiled machine, full of viable options and plenty of opportunities and alternatives for success and prosperity. The characteristics energy is the achievist. Now just imagine for a moment, if this level is in you, and you have striking workers, you're not going to accommodate that because they're dead against your worldview at that particular point in time. They're not helping you to achieve. They are a thorn in the flesh. And you will deal with it probably in the same way as it was done in Marikana. By the same token, by the way, this is what the research points towards in terms of management and ownership at Marikana at the time. Primarily level 7. Nothing wrong with it. But let's just recognize that's the worldview. That's the status at that particular point in time. I, as a consultant, walk into the planning room to devise strategy. Part of the strategy is the application of labor. This is how that executive at that particular point in time is looking at the world. Let's look at the worker. Same time, same period. Their basic theme, do what you must just to stay alive. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, they're dying of hunger. Whatever we're paying them is not enough. Whether it's their fault or not, is not the point. They're dying of hunger. If you die of hunger tomorrow, you will also do whatever it takes. Not just to feed yourself, but also your family. This is real. This is the worker. Marikana, popular name, survival sense. Basic survival, food, warmth, sex, water and safety. Worldview, the world is a state of nature. The distinct self is barely awakened, and motivation is largely physiological. Now, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure out that those two worldviews are not necessarily going to get along. To go back to the example we had this morning of the collaborative space that you gave us. Imagine the challenge that I have if I put a level 3 and a level 7 in the same room with the expectancy of operating in the green zone. There's something that needs to happen first. The one needs to try and see the other's worldview. It's not necessarily going to give us a solution, ladies and gentlemen, but it's going to give us a start. If you see the world through your child's eyes, it's going to help you. It doesn't mean that you're not necessarily going to punish or guide or teach, but it's going to help you to understand behavior. And that should lead to better parenting. Now here is the difficult thing. When you combine philosophy and strategy. There's a contemporary philosopher by the name of Wilbur, and he did a lot of work that built onto this model of Don Beck. And he tells us this: the way in which your mind develops, a level 3 cannot be forced into a level 7. Right? Very significant what I tell you now. I can't put a level 3 down and say, but you have to see the world as a level 7. Physiologically, it's impossible. Because the thought process is something that needs to evolve. However, the level 7 can see on a level 3. Let me give you a practical example. A couple of years ago, did a big project for an organization. Can't mention the name, but they went through a retrenchment process. When we started with the retrenchment process, most of the managers that at that stage to know that they might be included in entrenchment while operating on level 7s, 8s and 9s. Now the 8 and 9 is even better than the 7. That's where you become aware of the rest of the world. You start sharing. Social responsibility becomes a big thing. You feel blessed and honored and you want to give. You want to open your wallet for good causes. That's where most of them were. The world is a happy place. I have to share. At the end of that retrenchment process, we run exactly the same questionnaire again. All the managers, whether at that particular point in time they have been retrenched or not, drop straight back to a level 3. What happened? I took away their salary. All of a sudden, it's all about survival. It's not about sharing anymore. It's not about the rest of the world. It's about me. So what Wilbur tells us is, management and owners. This is what Wilbur says. Management and ownership find themselves in a better position to see the world through the workers' eyes than the other way around. That's what's changing in the environment. We can't ignore it. It's not a question of we owe it to anybody or it's our responsibility. We simply just cannot ignore it. Because all of us know that we cannot carry on the way we're carrying on at the moment. So out of the depths of philosophy, we're starting to tell organizations, you need to change the way in which you're thinking about things. And today I only spoke about labor. I can have the same conversation when you talk about customers, about your suppliers. What's the supply? Is it a system? Is it something you want to screw for a better deal? Or is it a person? What's the customer? Somebody that you really don't care about, and they must just take whatever you give them? Or is it a person? When they pick up the phone and lodge a complaint, are they a nuisance? Do you look at them as a nuisance? Or is that a person that's seeing the world differently from what you are seeing, the way in which you are seeing? I'm not going to go through those slides because I've already covered that and said it, and I don't want to repeat. But I want to end and give some time for questions maybe with this powerful statement that we get from philosophy, ladies and gentlemen, said by Plato, close on what, 2,500 years ago? Man is not defined by making the right decision. Man is defined by dealing with the outcome of his decision. We can all still forgive people for what happened in Marikana. As a matter of fact, we don't have much of a choice but to forgive them, because it has already happened. But to just forgive is not good enough. What we need to do in the process is we need to get management to start to understand this philosophy, strategy. What on earth has it got to do with one another? This. It's okay if I get my strategy wrong. What I need to fix is how I react when it goes wrong and it's not right. We still primarily incentivize, promote, award and reward correctness of decision making. What Plato is telling us is that does not define the human being. I want to end with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stan. So we have got some 18 minutes left. You don't have to fill it all, but if there are questions.
Dr. Eckert, I just want to know, so once you've changed your view to the view of the person or the environment that you're trying to understand, what is the next step then? You probably need to practically communicate and demonstrate to them that you understand the point, and how do you then convince them, or how do you move forward from there?
Thank you. Very good question. Short answer is with great difficulty, but let me be honest and tell you what we normally do. Who of you saw the movie Dark Knight Rises? Batman. You're Batman fans. Right, great. Got one or two. There's a part in the movie where Master Bruce, who's the real-life character of Batman, is greatly disturbed because he's faced with the challenge from the Joker. Joker just keeps on burning the place down. And what Master Bruce is looking for the reason why he's burning the place down. Because once he can get to the reason, he thinks he can possibly understand the Joker. And then the aide to Master Bruce, the wise old gentleman, teaches him a very, very important lesson. And that is that not all people burn the world for a purpose. Some of them just like to see the world burn. When you work specifically with the Americana scenario, you have to understand and realize that there are also elements that just wants to see the world burning. Not everybody wants to join a room for purposes of collaboration. So the first step when you so-called drop down into that worldview so that you better understand it is to also, once you start seeing the world through that filter, eliminate people that just want to see the world burning. The idea would be to gather the collaborators, the people that you can put together in the green zone, and then start to communicate. The other thing which is difficult is even before you go into that stage of negotiation, you have to make peace with the fact, if you're on management or on ownership side, that you're going to have to give away something. And that something is normally real wealth. If you go into that session to defend why you shouldn't change, you're by and large just buying time and wasting everybody else's time. So we have a series of conversations before the time where we test the authenticity of those who are going to partake, and we do it on both sides, both on management and ownership and on union side, to ensure that the union is not just going to want to see the world burning, but they also want to reach real solutions. And then once you've managed to, again, with difficulty, patience, I mean, people kick against this. You ask anybody to give away 500 Rand of their salary, even if it's just for a good cause, they kick against that. So money, unfortunately, is that thing that makes us do things we otherwise wouldn't have done. But the next step is first to get agreement that yes, we are going to work towards collaboration, and then to take it to the next step.
Steiner, I'm also wondering, this is more a comment. Carl Rogers, the psychologist, says we don't listen because we are afraid we might understand, and if we understood, we may have to change.
Yeah.
And if that's not part of the dilemma as well.
So,
any other questions? There was one here and one at the back.
Hi.
hello.
I'm wondering if the gentleman over there was talking about the after effects. Do you have a step-by-step process that you take people through to go from, for example, a level 7 to a level 3?
Yes.
Can you tell us more?
Well, it's really more the work of Don Beck. In terms of spiral dynamics, there's a very step-by-step process methodology that you go through. The first would be there's a number of questions and a number of exercises that you do to determine your own level. And once you find your own level, it's then to explore the others. Now, we do the exercise in two ways. First, you yourself, by means of answers, questions, would determine your own level. So you might say at the end of the day, well, I'm definitely a level 5. And then you get your peers to evaluate you on the same questions. And they might put you on a level 7 or level 4. And it's then to have a discussion about, how come you see me as a 4 and I'm seeing me as a 5? It's really an exercise to, in a structured manner, take cognizance of that epistemological dimension and bring it in a structured manner to better levels of understanding, better communication. There was a comment yesterday, I think, by one of the speakers also that referred to the so-called buy-in concept, which is almost so outdated. Because what is buy-in based on? Buy-in is based on, I make a plan, I'm on level 6, and everybody else now needs to buy in other words, see the world the way in which I'm seeing it. So it's a 5-6 step-by-step process to first break down those filters. The important thing just to bear in mind, though, is it depends on what you want as an outcome for the exercise. Sometimes it might just be a team building. sometimes you might have real problems like the issues I highlighted today. You know, you can even do this as married couples. You can do this as good friends. You can do this with your children. So it depends on what you want to achieve at the end of the day. By and large, this is important, it will not provide a solution. It merely provides the atmosphere of understanding within which you can then together craft a possible solution. But it's not a solution finder.
Thanks, Stan. I found the insights very useful. But I think I just want to talk to what you said in your last statement. I think it's a very useful framework for analysis. But I think as one moves into solution, I think that's where the real issues I think start to emerge. And for me, the fundamental issue is it the solution, is it a negotiated peace or is it a negotiated peace or justice, or negotiated justice?
Yeah.
So that's fundamental. Is it value-based or is it something that will keep the peace?
Okay, again, very good question. It depends on what your challenge is that you have in the organization. By and large, when it comes to strategy, the way in which, and I'm talking about organizations that I work with, so please don't generalize this, but by and large, the organizations that I work with, strategy is something that management wants to do. And I then need to help them to get buy-in and get everybody mobilized into this direction. What we try to do through this is to say, strategy shouldn't be about what management wants to do. Strategy should be about what is the best for the business. And for that, management needs to step away from the business, and worker needs to step away from the business, and look at the business objective, and say, you know what this business needs from a strategic point of view is X, Y, and Z. So again, by and large, it's going to depend on what your challenge is. But it's probably a little bit closer to a value equalizer, or getting people to understand one another's values. But when it comes to strategy, it's to not still maintain the level of thought where strategy is something that management needs to come up with.
Any other questions?
Yes, there at the back.
I just wanted to ask you something very quickly. Why is strategic implementation failing in our country, in South Africa?
Based on the research that we have done, primarily because businesses still regard the environment as something that's stable. So what they tend to do is they tend to craft so-called long-term strategies and work towards a sustainable competitive advantage. Now, what that immediately means is, if I make a strategic choice today, I'm actually assuming that the environment, by and large, is going to remain as it is on the day of the planning for the next year or 2 or 3. But what's happening in reality is the environment keeps on changing. So what we're trying organizations to start to consider is to be more flexible in the application of resource and in the physical structure of the organization. And that is difficult, just really because people by nature are creatures of habit. So the strategy is a little bit of a misfit. The strategy, my promoter termed the phrase, he spoke about it, the optimal equilibrium, where the organization needs to move along with the environment. It's exceptionally difficult to achieve that, but by and large, our research currently points out that the biggest reason for failure is because of the misfit between organizational readiness and that environmental dynamics. Yes?
So we have a question here, one at the back.
Mine is really not a question. I just want to pass a bit of a comment, Stein. What you're saying here is something which in my career I often experienced as well, and I can then talk of experience here. And it's actually a fact that there are no fixed, hard and fast rules for solving any problem like the one in Marikana. Transnet, then it was still Transport Services, in the 80s had something like a 3-month strike of train operators and also the marshalling yard people. And it was really very much the same situation. Thank God we never got as far as having to shoot people or having people shot. Not that we would ever have advocated that. And it took us 3 months to really solve that issue, and it was a question of getting all the parties around the table, and we did all sorts of things to really coax people into that. We had ox brides in the area where they were striking and dishing out food in order just to sort of calm down the excitement, the bad excitement that there was. So to all of the people that are asking, like, what is the answer? The answer is that there should be eventually a commitment from both sides. Otherwise there is no answer and you won't find an answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. There was one more question there in the back. I just want to say for the record that I actually finished earlier because I wanted us to finish earlier. So the fact that we're taking the whole hour is for you to blame. No, I don't want to go play volleyball. I'm going to go have a drink. Right, at the back there.
Thank you very much for a very insightful sharing. I'm just thinking about if the organization sees strategy, for instance, from a level 7 side, and the other party, irrespective of who it is, from a level 3, and it's difficult to get for the 3s to the 7, but easy to get for the 7s to the 3. Does strategy not always then find a middle way or on the lower end, as opposed to the potential that it can be because of the window that people are looking through?
That is truly the question of the afternoon. I'm going to try and answer it like this, and I might get mixed up in my answer. You've actually asked a much more complex question than maybe you thought when you were asking it, and I say that with respect. Remember, strategy is not a question of matching worldviews. The matching of worldviews is a tool that we recommend when things fall apart. Strategy is a scientific fit between the opportunities and the threats that exist in an environment and the strengths and weaknesses in an organization. In other words, you take the organizational ability and you literally, there's a juncture between the organizational ability and what I can or cannot do in the environment out there. Now, that is as real as it gets. In other words, the strategy is not an exercise of a horse parade. It doesn't sit somewhere in the bush and it's going to fall out of the sky on evening number 3 after another braai and another beer. That's not what strategy is. It's not a creative exercise to come up with a perfect plan. It is scientifically looking at what is out there and what do we have in terms of application. Now, the challenge that I try to highlight here is who implements my strategy? People. Another word, workers. They implement the strategy. If you have a total disconnect, like the Maripana example, a start to address that challenge, because there's almost a total disintegration of that system, let alone an achievement of the strategy. But a start to achieve that challenge would be to start investigating the possibility that we need to bring the worldviews closer together. It's not necessarily going to change the strategy. What the worldview concept, that I've spoken about here this afternoon, helps us with is to achieve better implementation of the strategy. But you can't use what happened in Maripana to derail the strategy. The strategy remains an objective activity. Is that okay? Thank you very much for that question. That's really also helped me to clarify it. Thank you.
2 minutes and 20 seconds. Then I don't know what you thought when you came in here thinking about philosophy. I don't know if you've seen any TED videos on Dr. Ken Robinson. So you know philosophers, and I'm very glad he made it so practical, because philosophers have a funny way of looking at the world. So when a baby is born, and that first cry you hear, you think it's just a physical cry, but for a philosopher that is a kind of a sound that the baby makes. It's a cry saying to the world, here I am, where are you? So a philosopher looks differently at this. So philosophers also say that if a tree falls in the forest and there is no one to hear that tree falling, is it making a sound when it falls? So Ken Robinson says, even